A radio show that has been around for 50 years is bound to have a lot of meaning behind it. In this documentary, I'm going to explore just that. This is The O'Connor Show. So, I wanted to start with the history of the show. So, can you just tell me about who originally started the show?
The show was started by my dad, Mike O'Connor, back in 1971. And he started it. Do you want the story?
Sure.
Okay. Well, he and my mom lived in a variety of states. He kept on getting transferred because he was an underwriter for an insurance company, and he was transferred first from New York to Boston, Boston to Louisiana, Louisiana to Chicago. And when he was transferred here, shortly after he was transferred here, he actually lost his job.
Okay.
So he and my mom actually had a child in every city that he'd been transferred to. My brother was born in Boston, my sister was born in New Orleans, and I was born here in Chicago. And there's a very large Irish community here in this city.
According to Wikipedia, Chicago has the 15th highest percentage of Irish ancestry amongst large cities in America.
And my dad decided to pursue an occupation that he'd had when he was growing up in Ireland, and he used to sell insurance when he was in Ireland. He sold life insurance on the bike. He would ride around from house to house on his bike and sell life insurance. Anyway, so he decided he wanted to open up an insurance agency, and what's the best way to get customers, of course, is to get to know the folks. And my dad saw, he wasn't exactly, I wouldn't say he was gregarious. I wouldn't describe him as that, but he was never shy. He's kind of a quiet guy, but a very observant person, maybe, if you would. Anyway, so he started joining clubs and getting involved in the Irish community here, and as a representative of the club, he was sent up to the radio station several times to advertise whatever was going on in the social part of the clubs that he was in, to let people know in the area. That's how people got their information a lot of the time, was through the Irish radio show. So one of the hosts of the radio show saw that my dad really enjoyed being on the program, and he always volunteered to come up and give the information and everything. He said, why don't you start your own show? It'll help your business. And so the Mike O'Connor Show was born, 1971. Again, my father and mother had a house with a mortgage in Oak Park, 3 small children, and pretty much not a lot of income at the time. So this is a brokered program, which means that we pay for the time, so we rent the airtime, and then we have to get advertisers to help us pay for the airtime. Okay. So it was, all in all, it was a pretty big challenge. My mom, it was not in style at the time, 1971, but she decided she needed to go back to work. Otherwise, their income as a salesman would be very unsteady, and she wanted to have the benefits. And she worked actually at Sears when she first came out here. When she was 19, she came out. She worked at Sears in Boston. So there was a Sears, of course, Sears headquarters is here. So she went down to Holman Avenue and got a job at the catalog at Sears, and she worked there until the catalog closed in 1993, I think.
So do you think that the main reason your dad was doing the show was just to make money, or do you think a lot of it was like
That's funny.
or a lot of it was like he really liked doing the radio production?
That's a cute one. My dad did the show because he loved doing the show. It had nothing to do with money. In fact, we're not a not-for-profit, but sometimes I feel like we are, because the whole goal here that I have, and I think that he had too, of course, was for the show to pay for itself, and the show has paid for itself for a very long time. But no, he definitely didn't do it to make money. He did it to help promote his business, and then the show eventually took over everything. He became known as Mike O'Connor radio presenter, not Mike O'Connor insurance man.
So do you have any special memories that just come to mind from being at the radio show when you were younger, when he was first kind of doing it, or were you not here as much? Or
well, I was 4 when he started. Okay. So for me, I have no memory of not having the show. Do you know what I mean? My brother, who is 4 years older than I am, actually does remember, because my dad used to do a live radio broadcast out of a restaurant on the south side. He started out on, I think he had 2 shows, Fridays and Sundays, and he did a live broadcast, which was so brave. You know, you think about it, it was on till I think the wee hours of the morning, and people were drinking. You know, they were nuts back then. Anyway, they were definitely having a good time, and he had live. So he had live interviews, of course, at the time at a restaurant now. So people are drinking and eating and drinking and dancing, and there's so he did all that. I have no memory of that. My brother actually does remember a little bit of that, of going to the restaurant and being there for part of the broadcast. Probably fell asleep. I think the place was open till 2. My dad was a sociable guy, and he hung around. He was never a big drinker or anything like that, but he liked talking to people. He really did, or like sitting and listening to people, I should say, more than anything. Mm-hmm. So that's probably what helped him be a good radio host. Mm-hmm. He's a good listener.
Do you think that his passion for the radio show kind of carried over to you when you kind of took over, when you were first doing it with him?
His passion for the radio show? I suppose so. I mean, I never thought about that. You know, he loved the radio show. I wouldn't say, what a weird thing to think about. He did have passion for the radio show. He cared deeply about it. He spent a lot of time every week preparing for it. He was more into getting the news that was happening in Ireland disseminated here. So he would read all the newspapers from Ireland and take copious notes and do his own news broadcast, if you will, from here. It took a lot of energy, a lot of work for him to do it. So clearly he did. He loved it. He was passionate about it. Mm-hmm. And he really did enjoy the attention he received from doing it too. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
How did it spill over to me? I don't know. How did it spill over to me? That's a good question. I found out I liked it too. I'm not a shy person. I enjoy talking to people. When I first came on, it was a different show. You know, my dad's show was different than the show I do, completely different. He was very focused, like I said, on the news and sports and stuff like that. I'm more about, and he was always, of course, very passionate about Irish music and culture and everything like that. But I guess I'm more geared towards the stories of people. I find them fascinating, and usually they're the people that I'm interviewing are artists of some kind, whether they're musical artists, visual artists, whether they're filmmakers like yourself, or all kinds of, we have all kinds of people on.
Do you know like what kind of year, around what time you kind of took over and really started doing it on your own?
On my own, 2006, he retired.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And that was just, do you want to talk about that at all? Just
about him retiring?
Yeah.
Oh, well, it wasn't an announcement. It wasn't a big formal thing. He was just gradually like stepping back, and he didn't want to come. Like on a Saturday morning, he didn't want to. It was kind of sad because he ended up being diagnosed with Parkinson's dementia, and his memory started to go. Mm-hmm. And he used to have this amazing, like he could, a total recall of everything, telephone numbers. Like I said, he was an insurance man, policy numbers, expiration dates. And I think that was heartbreaking, actually. Mm-hmm. But he was so happy that I took over the show.
Yeah.
My mom, for a while, had trouble accepting the fact that he didn't want to do the show anymore. So she'd actually drive him over here, bring him to the studio, and leave.
Oh my.
Yeah, she would do that. So because she was not accepting of it. I mean, I was okay with it. I was just, it was and he'd been stepping back for some time, but when he finally was like, no, I'm not doing it anymore, it wasn't really an announcement. It was just like too much trouble to bring him here. Do you know what I mean? He fought my mom. He was like, no, I don't want to go. No. But he listened. He always listened to the show, and I always went over to my parents' house after the show for lunch. I'd bring lunch over, or my mom would make lunch or whatever, and he would sit there and talk about who was on the show, what happened, and all that. So he was always interested. Even later on, as he was sicker, he was still interested, always asking about who was there and whatnot. So yeah, he was always interested in it. He just didn't want to do it anymore. It was when his memory started going, it was really hard for him. It was hard to watch that.
Just in terms of the 50th anniversary of the show, does the 50-year mark mean anything special to you, or is it kind of just like another year going by?
50 years of broadcasting continuously? That's huge.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Think about that. Even though we're only on once a week for 2 hours, how many shows is that? How many hours of broadcasting is that? That's crazy. And we're self-supporting. The show is self-supporting and has been for many, many years. Actually, since I came on board, because I sold airtime for my dad too. So yeah, it's a huge accomplishment. I think it's massive.
I think that's all I have for the history, so we can move on to the content, which I know you said is kind of all over the place, but just can try to talk about that. So is there one like element or like main focus of the show that's kind of the most important for you?
Well, definitely is Irish. I would say, yeah, Irish culture. Irish. It's just life in general. As an Irish person, maybe is a better way to frame it. And I'm Irish American. My parents are both from Ireland, so how I grew up surrounded by all that. We spent a lot of time in Ireland when we were kids, and still have a lot of family there, thankfully. And I really enjoy helping people out. I like getting word out about a new artist or group or whatever. I just really like talking to people. I find them, as I said, I find them fascinating.
Has your world fallen apart? Or is this your work of art? The beauty lives behind any veil, and every trick you try and every trial you fail.
And so I'm just talking to the Irish people here, really Irish that are related to our community here in Chicago. This is how we all stay connected, especially now with this whole pandemic. It's really become so important that folks have some sort of an outlet. And I'm all about finding what we have, especially this crazy time that we're living in and the schisms within the country. I'm all about finding out what we have in common with each other, rather than focusing on the negative stuff. I like to think that I'm a unifier, and everybody, we're all humans, we all have a lot of things we care about that we all have in common. And so the Irish culture is, the Irish community here in Chicago, that's a big thing.
So is that kind of your target audience then, is just people, or Irish people in the Chicago area?
I welcome anybody listening, so.
Okay.
But I mean, it is called Chicago Irish Radio and the O'Connor Show. So we're just based here. So, but we stream now, and have been streaming for a long time. So we're getting an audience all over the country, which is phenomenal. It's real. Another thing is the fact that this is unscripted radio, and there's all kinds of screw ups. Live radio, you just never know what the heck is going to happen in the studio. And when we have people here, we're allowed to have people here during the normal broadcast, normal times without a pandemic. I never know who's going to be in the studio when I walk in, because people, we sort of have an open door policy for groups, and I mean, not just your average Joe off the street, but benefits, clubs, institutions, things like that. They're welcome to come in and talk about whatever it is that they need to talk about to get the word out. This is like a giant telephone.
Those people, they kind of just find out about the show like through listening to it, and then they can contact you if they want to be on it, and you kind of just...
Well, we've been around for 50 years, so a lot of people know. Irish radio is like, all the politicians know about Irish radio. We have a lot of politicians that come and advertise on our program during election season, which is always interesting. We're part of the community now. I mean, we're just part of people's lives. It's, and I say this, maybe it sounds cliche, but we really are here to acknowledge and celebrate the different milestones of people's lives. So for everything from births of babies to the deaths of members of our community, and everything between, whether it's first communions or graduations or marriage, all of that, all of those life milestones. People call and say, hey, would you play a song for so-and-so because they're getting married today? Or, hey, my very first grandbaby was born, would you play a song? And maybe, make the out, it's just, it's really a gift. I really think it's kind of amazing that we're allowed into people's lives like that.
Well, I think I'm going to do a song for Claire, my daughter, who's, I want to congratulate her on her communion. Now there's 4 who share this room, and we work hard for the crack. Sleeping late on Sunday, well, I never get to Mass, and it's a long way from Clare to here. It's a long way from Clare to here. It's a long, long way. It gets further by the day. It's a long, long way from Clare to here. Okay, all you Clare people out there, I want you to sing along with me. It's a long, long way from Clare to here. It's a long, long way from Clare to here. It's a long, long way from Clare to here.
So you feel like you do a good job of connecting to the people that are tuning in?
Yes, I don't think we'd be here for 50 years if we didn't.
That's true. That's a good point. This is a question that I'll probably cut out if you don't know. My dad was just curious, but
Okay.
Do you happen to know how many miles the radio transmission ranges? How
The
far
radio
it can
transmission?
go? Yeah.
Yeah, we actually, how many miles though? I'm not really sure. There is a map of the broadcast area, and it goes all the way up to Indiana and almost to Wisconsin, going north and south, I guess, and going west. It just depends. It depends on the weather. It depends on the day, and But I've gotten it as far out as almost like Lyle, I guess, because it's a radio signal. It sort of is dependent upon weather conditions and things like that.
I think we touched on this a little bit, but since it's important to you to have guests and promote people, how are you still doing that with the pandemic?
Oh yeah, well, normally I am quite a dictator about that. I demand that people show up in the studio if they want to talk about something. I just don't call in. No, I'm here. You get your butt in here and sit in that chair. So, and I really feel that having additional people in the studio is extremely important. It just, it brings a whole different energy in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now we can't do that because it's not safe. So now I do phone-in interviews. Today I had 3. It's the best we can do for the time, and at least it's something. I had COVID, and actually the studio was shut down for a whole month because one of the brokers had COVID. That wasn't me.
Yeah, and they had to disinfect it. Or whatever they had to do,
so we had to figure out a way to create the show without coming into the studio. Now then I had to use my poor old equipment that I have at home, which was very substandard, but managed to pull it out. But when I found out I had COVID, and then I didn't know how I was going to get the show done, and Julio suggested that I do it via the internet. So he actually figured out a way. Did you know that? We actually streamed it through YouTube. As I mentioned at the top of the show, that we are quarantining at home for the next 8 days because we may have been exposed to coronavirus. Julio just told me it sounds good. It was not the ideal circumstance, believe me. And I did end up using a couple of old shows that I had, but we did stream over YouTube. So, very creative ways of still making it happen, and it was still live. The YouTube thing was still live. I'm going to make mistakes, and I'm okay with that. Maybe I look like an idiot. Guess what? Don't care. That's the gift of age. And it's live, so people understand that spurts are going to happen.
I think the fun thing about doing it live also is that on your show you do a lot of dedications.
Right.
People send in, play something for my grandmother, or my daughter's graduating, play some song for her in particular. That's a nice advantage of having something live, because that obviously you have to have it timed. By the time somebody sends something in on an email, by the time somebody picks it up, the show's already done, and it's too late to make a recording, or can you postpone this dedication for some reason? And in many cases you can't. It's just timely. So that's.
I'm always looking at my email and my Facebook notes and stuff like that during the show. But sometimes, I do miss. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, I missed it. I don't see it until after the program's over, and I'm like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
And then I have to send them something saying, I'll do it next week.
See, and that's one of the nice things about live, because you may pick up the phone, oh, here's a caller. You never know who's calling or what they're calling about. And the fun of it is you pick it up and all of a sudden it's like somebody you haven't talked to in 20 years.
Yeah.
or somebody is expected to come into town, a performer that you didn't even know, it's a surprise visit, and they'll show up.
So I was just wondering what you love most about the radio show, or your favorite part. Is it just kind of the community, or?
You know, that really is a very difficult question to answer. I mentioned a couple things already. So I do really enjoy I don't really even call it an interview. I just like talking to people.
Mm-hmm.
So I like talking to people. I like finding out about them, and I find people fascinating. They're so interesting. Also, I really feel privileged to be part of people's lives. So both of those things I think are my favorite parts of the community. It's really tough though when folks pass away and somebody that I know, and I hear about it here on the show for the first time. That's happened several times. I'm like, oh my God, you know.
Yeah.
But it's like I said, you know, we're celebrating all aspects of life, whether it's birth or the life of somebody who just passed away.
Mm-hmm.
So and along with that, when we do those announcements, I can't even tell you how many family members contact us and say, hey, can we get a tape of that show? When my dad died. Sorry, I didn't expect
It's okay. It's okay.
I had such nice letters and cards for our listeners, and I had one letter from a lady. Oh my God! And she shared this memory. She said, you know, she was like, "I'm sorry about your dad. We just heard about it today. I just wanted to write you a note." And then she wrote me this 2-page letter in pencil on just like line paper that she used at school. And she said, every Saturday, my dad died too, you know, about 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. And we grew up with your show, and every Saturday, my dad would make us a huge breakfast, and we'd sit down and we listened to the radio show. And my dad grew up wanting. He was very poor when he grew up, and she said one of his favorite things to say is, when somebody asks you how you like your eggs, you say, with another one. It's just these wonderful things that people share. I feel so privileged to be part of that.
So you do have advertisements on your show.
Yes.
So
yes. We have to pay for the show, so yeah.
Do you take anyone, or does it have to like?
I don't take anyone. I've made that mistake in the past, and I only take folks that I believe in to advertise, so that kind of makes my life a little difficult. I won't just advertise anybody. I had somebody come in and said they wanted to promote this vitamin on our show that cured cancer and all this stuff. Oh. And he'd be willing to prepay and all. I said, no.
Yeah.
No. And because people trust me and they believe me, and
right.
I find that would be a violation of trust. I wouldn't do that.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything else that you'd want to say about just the content in general, what you kind of put out there?
What do you want? I mean, I don't know, Jordyn. When I come in on a Saturday, my goal is to lift people up.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to bring anybody down. I don't care how I feel when I leave my house. By the time I get here and walk into the studio, I need to turn it on and be upbeat and happy and positive for my audience. I think that's very important. So never mind what the crying. I don't do this. But okay. I'm not the one that's used to being interviewed. I'm used to interviewing other people.
Yeah, that's true.
So this is a novel experience for me.
I'm not used to doing either. So
you're doing a fine job. You made me cry 4 times.
We've talked about the history and we've talked about the content. So the last category I had was the production of the radio show.
Okay.
What are the steps that you have to take to get the radio show running? Just like the technical, or even just before you come in, just preparing yourself like mentally to produce the show.
Oh well, you know, I've been doing this for 30 years. Okay. So I guess when I'm driving in, I've got about a 25-minute drive. I'm listening to the show that leads into ours. The Haggerty show is on before ours. Mm-hmm. I'm listening to them, and I'm just thinking about who my guests are, who's coming on. If the Haggerty is like during normal times, if somebody's here for the Haggerty show and they're guests on the Haggerty show, chances are they'll be guests on mine. So that way I kind of know that. Not everybody asks permission, like I said before, which is fine. A lot of people just show up and they know that they're welcome to do so. During the week, if I have, like, especially, well, now this is a unique time that we're in. I do schedule interviews. I call people and ask, you know, I reach out to people, say, do you want to be on the show? I'd like to have you on because I find you, whatever, interesting. I had Frances Black on last week. She's phenomenal. She's an Irish singer, very famous Irish singer, and now she's actually a senator in Ireland, and she's created this foundation for the families of addicts.
Okay.
So anyway, so my process is, during the week, I spend probably now about 20, 30 hours on the show for a 2-hour radio program. Doing social media stuff, which social media is such a pain in the butt for a 53-year-old person. But I do find that it's a necessary part, a necessary evil, if you will. But the beautiful thing about that is, because of social media now, we're all over the world.
Yeah.
I spend a fair amount of time on that. Don't really enjoy doing that. That's probably my least favorite thing to do, because I'm a live show, and having something that is, I don't know, planned or whatever, just is not natural to me. Scheduling interviews, just sort of kind of organizing the show in my head, I suppose. Music, if I hear an artist or something, I definitely make a note that I want to play that, or, stuff like that. So my production, the board, you probably have shots of the board, you'll see that. We do run our own board here, so the engineer is in here, and the only time he interferes at all is when I forget to turn on my mic. Like today, I forgot to turn on my mic. Saying something very profound, of course. My mic was off.
Good morning. Hang on a second. Hold on. Chris is going to come and help me here. I don't know if the rest of the world can hear you, Chris. Oh, that's better. Yeah. Can you? Oh, you can't hear me. That's why. My mic was off. Perfect.
So it sounds like you like the fact that the show is live and you're kind of interacting with people.
I hate recording the show. Recording the show sucks. It's terrible. It's a totally different vibe. When it's live, it's exciting. You never know what's going to happen. When it's recorded, you can go back and edit it and, make it all pretty and stuff like that. Live is like life. It's sometimes it's ugly, sometimes it's beautiful.
Very true. So even with that being said, is there ever times where you're kind of stressed about the live aspect, or are you just...
No. Not anymore. When I first started, back in 1991, when I first joined the show with my dad, he would just throw stuff at me to do, which was his way, and a lot of people's way. They just throw you right into the frying pan, And I would say I was self-conscious at the time. Now I just don't care. Honestly, I don't care. People know me, and this is me. I don't have a persona on the show. The show gets me as I am right now talking. This is me on the radio. This is me all the time. I don't have an act or anything like that.
Yeah.
And live radio is exciting. It's energizing. It's fun. It's fun. The unexpected is fun. Sometimes it goes south. Most of the time it doesn't. You have to trust yourself. And if things go wrong, oh well, move on.
That's a good way to think about it.
That's the only way to think about it.
We used to do more live shows, and because of the pandemic, obviously, a lot of people dropped down, they never came back. They're just doing everything remotely now. It's different when it's a live show because everything is so spontaneous. And when it's recorded, obviously, you can't do much except make sure it plays correctly, and it comes in through the internet now, so a lot of times we don't even have time to preview anything. We just make sure the sound level is good, and we put it on the air and we hope for the best.
Yeah.
But like with anything, the internet sometimes kicks out, and occasionally we'll lose a program right in the middle. It'll just kick out, and then what can you do? At least when you're live and it's spontaneous, you can always make up for everything. You just cover everything. But that's the way radio is now. It's very little live anymore. We got to be more creative to have something that you have to give to an audience that they can't get in another way. So I think one of the things Siobhan does too, as well as besides being on the air presenting something that she's presenting, she has people come in, or I don't know if you still do.
We've had live music on the show. Whenever a musician comes up, I demand that they bring their instruments so they play. They try to hand me a CD, I'm like, no.
They do giveaways on the air. That was a lot of fun because that's something you never expect. Give away tickets to something, if an actor comes in, and they got a show going on. So it was fun. I actually went to some of the things because Siobhan talked about things like the American Heritage Center. That's how I found out about it. I met some of the people who came over. Some wonderful performers who I didn't know about till I found out through her show. So I got to meet them in person. They were all great. We have another chief engineer. It's become so easy for him. He just sets up his computer, links it to his at home, and
This
he
is
can
Hal.
manipulate things. Yeah.
This is Hal. Do
Yeah.
not touch Hal. This is the heartbeat of the radio station now, right?
Yeah.
When we get back to normal, I'm looking forward to having guests in the studio again because I really miss having guests in the studio. The call-ins are okay, but the guests in the studio, there's nothing like that energy.
And to get the live, if it's a musician, somebody performing.
The performance, yeah.
To get
That's
the story
amazing.
from-
That is amazing.
Not just the performance, but what they tell you. What are they in town for? And they're going here and they met this person.
And how did they start? And, you know, it's the stories of people's lives.
So,
Amazing.
It's
a gift.
I think that's the future. Live radio of some kind.
I don't think the desire is going to go away. I
No.
think the desire is there because people don't like all this contrived stuff. You know, I mean, it's nice to have something scripted, obviously, otherwise it would be chaos, but I think the beauty of live radio, like Lou was saying to me earlier, you're having conversations, people love to eavesdrop, and you're constantly having conversations with people. That's what we're doing. We're having a chat on the show or whatever.
I think you said that people across the country have been able to listen. How are they actually able to listen in? Just with like I know the transmission like doesn't go obviously
We stream.
all over. Okay.
So the radio station actually has a live stream connected to their website, so people can click on that. And also any of the radio apps, TuneIn Radio is the one that most people use. We're on there too.
So is there a way for people to listen after, or is it just the one
So
live thing?
at one time when I first started, when I had the website built to begin with. What a waste of money that was. Dumb. But I didn't know any better. I also bought bandwidth, which cost a fortune. So I had old shows archived on there, and it was just too expensive. It didn't make any sense. And we have to stay pretty lean here. This is not a money-making enterprise. I wouldn't mind, but you know, we don't make a ton of money, and I let that go. So I'm open to having, you know, some sort of a place where I can archive shows where people can access, because my dad recorded the shows all the way back from 1971. Now a lot of those haven't survived because they're on cassette tape and they're damaged, or you know, they were thrown around the house and ill-used. I remember actually taking one apart when I was a kid and my dad going, "What are you doing?" I would like to do that sometime if it becomes almost free. That'll do it.
Gotcha. Is there one part of producing the radio show that you find particularly difficult? Which you were talking about social media.
Right, the social media. I don't really find it difficult. I find it really annoying. And I resent that I have to spend time doing it.
Yeah.
I'd rather pass it off to my kids, but they don't want to help me. So, I just find it's a time suck. I mean, Facebook is my age group, I guess, that really get lost in there. You tumble in and you're gone for hours. It's bad.
The only other main part I wanted was just like a little tour. So I don't know if you wanted to give that or.
Sure, I can give it to you. So if you come over here, if you look over here, you'll see that we have professional equipment. Now it is a lot of people would regard it as old-fashioned because there's cassette players, there's the CD players, there's the turntable. But I am so grateful to have that because we've been on the air for 50 years, so we have so much music. I mean, and I know people are like, well, you can just stream everything. Well, not everything is actually available online. And it's kind of neat having the actual physical object that you can play and look at the line notes and all of the, you know, when somebody creates an album, they create an album and it has a theme to it usually. So I appreciate that. Also, when they redid the studio, which they redid not that long ago, actually, about, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago, it pretty much was the same for many, many years. All of this is new. They left the turntable in for me because we have so many. I requested that because we have so many records. My engineer that works with me on the weekends, Julio, I was transferring something from a record to digital, and I was using the turntable in the other studio. And I said, Julio, it's you know, it's a professional turntable. I said, how do you use this? He's like, I don't know. I said, what do you mean you don't know? You're an engineer. It's before my time. So I actually had to show him how to use the turntable, one of my favorite stories. So I use this, and of course I go online and use music online,
Here's my board. Here's my seat. Most radio people that you see wear headphones. I hate wearing headphones. I don't want to listen to my voice when I'm talking. I find it really distracting, okay? So I don't wear headphones, which leads to many errors, you know, commercials playing, I'm talking, and I forgot to turn my mic on, or I forgot to turn Bridget's mic on. So that's, but I still don't wear them, sorry. I don't like them. So anyway, so that's that. The telephone now is very important, especially with the interviews, but I get requests we get telephone requests, which is still, that's why Bridget Looney is here. She helps with the show. She answers the phones. And now, of course, I get requests through social media, and I also get requests through the website. Well, now, if you look at the chairs are a little bit messy right now, but at this time of year, this is usually our busiest time of year from about September all the way through May. There's so much going on in the Irish community that these chairs, every one of them on a Saturday would be full. Every one. And I have a 2-hour show. So imagine how quickly I have to move people through. But I love it. I love that. It's just, I find it very energizing and exciting. Studio right here, the one that we're in, it looks a lot different, but this is the very same studio that my dad broadcast from, the very first show in 1971. The very same studio. And this is a studio when we were kids that we would come up to. Now my dad, the radio station was WOPA at the time. It was sold a couple of times. So he did move around. He had to move to different brokered radio stations. But then the Polish National Alliance, that's WPNA, bought the radio station, and so they started doing broker time again, so we came home. This was home. A little history about this radio station. This has been around since the 1920s. Ray Kroc, who is the one who franchised McDonald's, used to play piano here.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and I'll show you the original board, which they have still. Is the original board. When I first learned how to run the boards, it was on this. There was one exactly like this in the other radio studio. Now, when things changed, it was an adjustment, but actually it was so much better because if you look, you only have 2 buttons for mics here. So if I turned on the guest mics, they were all on. All of them. So you had to be really cognizant about what was going on. Now I can actually turn on and off individual mics. So I love that aspect of it actually.